Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Catching Fire, the Hunger Games series. It is the second book in the Hunger Games series, so I kind of feel like I will spoil a couple of things. If you haven't read the first book, here's a little mini overview of what it's about. Katniss and Peeta are pretty much from the beginning, they're going on this tour of the victors. They're pretty much just going to different districts, just trying to settle people down. After what happened in the first book, they're pretty much trying to mend what they did in the first book by going on this tour and pretty much trying to appease everybody and make everybody think, hey, you know, we don't really know why she did this. And throughout the beginning of it, Katniss repeatedly says, I don't really know why I did it. It was kind of just like in a moment, but like I also love Peeta. Pretty much just trying to appease the masses the whole entire time. They're keeping up this act of Peeta and Katniss being a couple. They're actually told right in the beginning that when she goes back to her family with Gale, everybody knows that Gale kind of has some feelings for Katniss, but nobody really like, they see them being together, but then they made up the facade that Gale is her cousin. So they kind of hint at that a little bit. And then also you're introduced to President Stowe for the first time. He was mentioned in the first book, but you actually get to meet him for the first time, and he is very, very cold and cynical. But he is completely different than what I remembered reading him about. He's very small and kind of almost has like a Napoleon complex. You get more scenes with Haymitch and Effie, mostly them kind of just trying to make Peeta and Katniss this like power couple and like pretty much just make them seem like they're like regular people and like transitioning into the victor's village, and Katniss has to find a skill to do so that she can pretty much like just show the people that like, hey, like I can do other things other than hunt, which is illegal. But she pretty much just lies that she wants to be in fashion, but the only reason why she does that is because she wants to get to know Cinna a little bit more. And then Peeta, of course, his skill is painting, so pretty much they have nothing else better to do. They're pretty much just like lounging around. They don't have to work, they don't have to do anything, but they need to have something to preoccupy their time. Meanwhile, there is some hints of kind of rebellion in the beginning. It's pretty much told off the bat about that, and Katniss is just trying to appease all of that. So it's kind of her just tiptoeing around the whole entire issue throughout the whole entire book. Like, I don't hate this book, I don't hate this series by any means. I think it's a really good series, and I think if you are really into dystopian, it's fantasy but also has a female protagonist and a love story. I do love the writing in it. Suzanne Collins, she has a really great way of depicting everything. I can visually see everything when I'm reading this. I am immersed into the whole entire story and I really love it. But I do feel like this book is kind of just filler. Like, there are some like keynote scenes in this book, but that's all I kind of got from it. I don't really remember much else in the story other than like a few key note scenes here and there. Okay, they're doing the Victor's tour. They pretty much just shot this man who pretty much was just like doing the symbol again, and it kind of, and I think I talked about this in the first review that I did, the symbol, it kind of still rubs me the wrong way. I understand that probably the other districts don't know what this means because it's more of a District 12 thing. The fact that like this means rebellion now is kind of weird, considering it originally just means like we salute you. It's kind of like you're just saying goodbye to somebody who's gonna pass away, that you know that they're gonna die. So it's kind of, it's really weird and foreshadowing stuff. And I loved Effie and her little quick remarks every now and then, or like she was just really innocent throughout the whole entire book, where she was just like, what was that? And then you just hear the gunshots in the background, and like, you know, Effie is not stupid and she understands what a gunshot is. I enjoyed her comic relief just because it kind of like helped ease everything, because like the more, if I don't have characters that are like that, it really does bother me, because then I start thinking about, oh my god, these people are killing one another, now they have the quarter quell and they're basically telling them you're gonna have to kill each other even though you're best friends. And even Katniss says in the book, oh well, like none of us are safe because we always thought we were supposed to be safe because we're victors, you know, victors never have to go back. And to me, when Katniss was kind of just like, oh, like how could like the game makers know so many years ago about doing this? And I'm like, Katniss, do you really think that the game makers just hundreds and hundreds of years ago had said, oh yeah, you know, on the 25th or the 50th Hunger Games, or was it the 45th Hunger Games, that, you know, we're gonna have all the victors fight against one another? Like, no. There was one time I'm on this like Hunger Games forum, and some people were talking about like, oh, like in the original book when she got her score of a 12, they were really doing that because they knew that she was a threat to their lives and they wanted her to be a target in the games. And then it finally actually is stated that way in this book, because the whole scene with her showing that she knew about Seneca Crane, and then Peeta doing the whole thing with Rue, which I really thought was beautiful, because I was like, where's that scene? I want to see Rue. I want to see him paint Rue, and instead Katniss just, you know, takes a dummy and just pretty much shows them that she knows about Seneca Crane. And I'm like Katniss, why? Like, I'm like, of all the things you could have done, you did that. I like, it kind of just, I understood the gravity of it, but then at the same time I was just like, it doesn't really feel very like momentous. I still remember it, it just doesn't hit very well with me. I don't know. And then she's like, oh, why would they give us a 12? And then Hamish finally said it, where he was like, well, they did that because they want you to have a target on your back. And I'm like, yeah, they probably did that in the first book too. That's probably the reason why. Peeta and Katniss's relationship throughout the whole entire book, a lot of it is just back and forth, back and forth. It's constantly where she's like, I don't love him that way, but I care about him and I owe him my life, and like, we have to save him. He can't, you can't let me win this time. And I'm just like thinking in the back of my mind, I'm like, Katniss, like a book ago you were just like, I have to win for my sister, I have to live. And I'm like, and now you're just like, I don't love him, but I need to save him. And then my friend told me, well, like, maybe it's just because like she felt bad because they weren't telling him stuff in the original games. Didn't hit very well with me. I don't really like the relationship. I don't really like it. I agree with Hamish when, I believe it is in this first book, where he says you don't deserve him. He went along the lines of saying like, you can never deserve that boy. And I'm like, yeah, she never will deserve him, because she is constantly saying, oh, I don't know if I really like him that way, but like I care about him. And then by the end of the book she's just like, no, like I wanted him back, why would you leave him, and this and this and this, and like it's better off that he's dead, and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, Katniss, pick a side. Do you love him or do you not? Like, I'm very confused. And then the whole Gale thing with like, oh, they're cousins, I was just like, you know, I was like, this just doesn't feel right. And then my friend brought it up where she told me, she's like, you know what, that's probably the reason why in the first book it was mentioned why they both look very similar and why a lot of people mistake them for relatives, because I believe Katniss said in the first book, oh, he's almost like my brother, we look almost exactly the same. So it was pretty much just setting up to say, oh, later on, yeah, they're cousins now. Two other things that I really didn't totally like about the story, and it's just me personally, I don't really love Katniss as a character, how she has kind of like a superiority complex. If you've ever read this series or you're reading her point of view, and I've told my friend countless times about this, for some weird reason when I read her personal thoughts, she sounds very like a normal person, like I can understand what she's saying, but then she acts and does things that aren't really things that you would think she would do, because when she speaks and when she acts, it's completely different from what she's actually thinking. So it's kind of really bizarre, because I feel like I'm reading two different people when I'm reading this book. She talked about how, oh, like I barely missed the game makers with my arrow hitting the apple, but I intentionally meant to hit the apple. The same conclusion on President Snow. He kind of has a similar thing going on with him. Like, he's very imposing and very like serious and strict, and he gave me more chills when I read it. And you're like threatening her life and her family and this and this and this, and like the whole entire time I just kept thinking about like, not only Katniss would be affected by this, but also Peeta and Hamish and Cinna and all these other people. But like, it's never really like fully mentioned until later on when Katniss starts to see that it's starting to affect other people. Because in the beginning when she talks about, oh, I want to leave with Gale, we can leave and whatever, and Gale's kind of on board, but then later on he's just like, no, like what about everybody else, what if Peeta's family doesn't want to come with us, you know, how are you gonna get everybody to go with you? The thing that I really did love was the whole like whipping scene. That was very emotional. I I appreciated that scene. For once, I felt like Katniss really was being herself. Yelled to her mom, she like, you know, was doing her own thing, and I felt like she was her own person. Like she actually was who I imagined her being. But then you have the scene later on where she pretty much injures herself when she tries to come back into the district, and then she just plays it off cool with the peacemakers, and she's kind of just like acting like, oh, like I know what I'm doing and this and this and this and this. But then like I kind of feel like her personality it just shifts, because there are moments where like in the beginning she'll be like, no, like I don't want to do the rebellion and this and this and this, and I'm trying to appease the makers, and then she finds out like, oh well, President Snow didn't agree with any of it, so like what does it matter now, but then she's also gonna say, oh, like let's leave, but then afterwards then she's like, well, maybe I could start a rebellion, but then by the end of it she's just like, no, I don't want to be in a rebellion anymore. And I'm like, Katniss, make up your mind. Gale telling her like, wake up, like there's a rebellion and you need to be a part of it. Like I understand she didn't want to be a part of it, and they kind of just used her, like at the end when she pretty much just says Haymitch used her in a new game pretty much without telling her. And I'm like, yes, that's true. She's the only one that's kind of like oblivious to everything in the world. Like she's more oblivious than Effie is, which is really weird. Is aware of it, but she doesn't want to acknowledge it. So they're in the training arena with the rest of the gang who is in the Quarter Quell. And then she talks about how like it reminds me of high school. And she's just like, Peeta's over there talking to the careers again, and this and this and this and this. And we kind of had the same thing happen in the first book, and I'm just like, Katniss, like, this isn't high school. You're gonna kill one another. Like, join them. So to me, it was just kind of weird that like high school was brought up, because I'm just like, okay, I'm reading this and this reminds me of my high school, and I'm just like, I remember when I was always alone and no one wanted to sit next to me because I was the weird quirky girl who would just read during the cafeteria. Felt attacked in that moment, but it's fine. I missed Cinna. I missed Haymitch a lot too. He's pretty much like the only person that like tells Katniss, you know, like, get it together. Like out of everybody else, I feel like I feel like Haymitch and Cinna are really like the only two people that she ever actually listens to and never actually takes like advice from them, whereas everybody else she's kind of just like, I'm better than you, or like Effie, like she doesn't know any better, and this and this and this, and I'm just gonna play nice with her. And like Gale, like I don't want him out. Like Gale, I don't want him to get hurt, but like at the same time he might be right. And then Peeta is just like, oh, but Peeta, I just wanted to say Peeta, but like out of everybody else she only listens to Cinna and Haymitch. But Cinna, oh my god, when I read Cinna I was just like, no. Because when I first read this book, I really didn't, my brain was just like, no, he's alive, he will be alive, I'm gonna see him again after this book. And then I never saw him again, and I was just like, he died. I was so sad because I was just like, why, Cinna? I'm like, I understand you wanted her to be something and you turned her into the Mockingjay symbol pretty much, but I'm like, Cinna, it wasn't worth your life. I was like, why? I was so pissed because I remember as a kid just thinking, he's gonna come back, he's just locked up somewhere, he's just locked up somewhere just like Joanna and Peeta are, he's gonna come back, and he never came back. Poor Cinna. And then also Finnick. Finnick is by far, like, every time like I would read Finnick, I was just like, you know what, forget Peeta and forget Gale, I'm team Finnick all the way. Can I be Annie, please? I just love him so much. He's like, this book just reminds me of high school. Is that weird? So some of the scenes with him where he's just like talking to her and like being funny, and like there's a scene where he's just like, he has a piece of rope and he makes a noose, which is a really weird joke to make, but the fact that he was pretending to kill himself kind of just reminded me of guys when I was in high school, where like I would just be reading a book or doing something, and I would just be reading, and then some random guy would just come up to me and be like, so what you reading? Like the whole sugar cube thing, and then the whole secret thing part 2, like, oh, I don't use money, I take people's secrets. He was just always kind of like nice to her, and she never really like wanted to talk to him. She was just kind of like, I don't like you, and like, why are you paying attention to me? But then at the same time, it also felt really weird because Finnick is 25. He was also the youngest victor to win, but he's 25 and he seems like he's hitting on this 16-year-old. Like, you know, if you want the sugar cube, we might as well have them. And like, it just felt really weird, the conversation, but I loved it at the same time. But then I'm also like, Finnick, like, eyes on Annie. Like, instance where like, oh, like all the tributes have like these crazy costumes, right? They're talking about these costumes, about how like every other tribute is like incorporating fire. And me and my friend were talking about this, and I'm just like, because she asked me, she's like, do you remember what Katniss's outfit was? And we were trying our hardest to find this, you know, outfit of hers, and we never found it. It never really was specified. It was just like, oh, she's in this jumpsuit that kind of looks like coal and it's a little bit on fire. So I'm like, okay, you kind of just like redid the first Hunger Games, but like it looks not as great as the original. I'm like, okay, so yeah, the movie did it pretty well, but everybody else kind of got a good description of it. But then I told my friend, I'm like, you know what would have been really funny? If Joanna was a burning bush. I love Joanna. Joanna is one of my favorite characters as well. I know she's a little bit out there and she's just like, I'm just gonna strip in front of everybody twice, I don't care. And I'm just like, you know what, Joanna, I appreciate you. She's like another one of those characters that's kind of like comic relief. Like, Joanna, you're more than meets the eye. I kind of feel like it almost does insinuate that she's gonna do something bad towards Katniss, but at the end it's kind of like, no, she's just helping them out. So I kind of feel like some of the maliciousness from Joanna shouldn't have really been added in. I understand it was trying to set up that, oh, she's gonna backstab them and whatever. The whole necklace thing, I know it was kind of just something to like appease everybody, like to appease everybody else and whatnot. And I just found it kind of weird. But then like the whole pearl thing, and I'm like, oh, that's sweet, it's a pearl. And like the mentioning of like Effie saying that, you know, if you put enough pressure on Cole, you get pearl. But then it like the saying is diamonds, but then that's also not true. But like, poor Effie, I appreciate Effie just being there, and she's just like, yeah, let's all be a team and I miss you guys. And like, she's just kind of like the mom of the group. And then Hamish is like, no, you can't let them go to the, you can't go with them in the training room because they have to seem like they're older. But then at the same time, like, it always hits me, I'm like, these kids are like, what, 17? Like, it's been a year, they're 17, they're kids. they're children. I completely forgot that Peeta had said, oh my god, Katniss is pregnant and this and this and this. And then at the back of my mind, I was just like, you're too young to have kids. Pregnant, maybe she won't have to go into the games. And I'm like, dude, like, I don't think that's gonna happen, because in the last Hunger Games, they literally had a kid who had a limp. I will say though, it would have been interesting to see Hamish in the Hunger Games, I'm not gonna lie. It would have been interesting. The whole thing with Hamish being like the smart guy who won the Hunger Games using the force field, and I was kind of just like, that's actually like a really cool little tidbit, because it kind of like hints to later on that there's going to be a force field within the new arena, and how Katniss kind of uses that trick a little bit too. There were momentous scenes like the whole, let's turn her into a Mockingjay, which I thought was beautiful, and like the whole thing with Cinna, that I hated the fact that Cinna stood up in the arena during that whole entire time, because I was like, Cinna, please don't take credit for this. Like, it hurted me so much. I'm like, you know, holding hands with one another, and like Caesar trying to get a control of everything. And like, I appreciated Caesar, because at the same time I was just like, man, Caesar, like, when all of this shit goes down, you're never mentioned again. Like, you're mentioned a couple of times, but like, what happens to you after all of this? Like, I loved all the other characters. It's just Katniss that kind of is like there, and she's just like, I don't want to be a part of this, but I am a part of this, and I'm gonna run into the woods and do this and this and this. And no, there's no District 13. And I was just like, yeah, like, Katniss kind of this is why you don't make the plans. Her being like, they betrayed me and this and this and this, and I'm like, Katniss, like, you just weren't listening, you weren't hearing them. The new game maker, he told her about the clock, but then at the same time I'm like, okay, he told you about the clock, Katniss, but he also showed that he had a Mockingjay. He was in support of you, so there was something happening there. Like, I understand that like she wasn't quick to pick up on things, but then she was quick to pick up on other things that were kind of like bizarre, like the whole clock thing at the end. Pretty much like how Gale was telling her in the beginning, saying like, wake up, you're a part of a rebellion, you're giving them hope. And it's like everybody is telling her this, kind of like almost secretive, and she's just not listening. And then I felt really bad for Finnick at the end, when she literally just told him like, what about like, you know, Annie and them and all of them and this and this and this, and then the Finnick is just like, I'm so sorry, like I was gonna try and save them, and he's trying to make her feel better, and then she just pretty much throws back in his face, what about your family, what about them, what if they're dead? And then he pretty much just breaks down. I'm like, Katniss, like the man tried to help you and you throw it back in his face that, oh my god, what if his loved ones are dead? And then Joanna gets captured, and then Peeta gets captured. But like at the same time, I loved one of her lines that I loved was the fact that she said, I don't have anybody else left in my life, so it doesn't matter if I get gotten anyway. Prim is very like not mentioned very much throughout the whole entire thing, a little bit in the beginning, and then by the end of it when she's like, oh my god, Prim is here and I see her, and she gives her a big hug, but like she hasn't thought about Prim the whole entire time she was in the games. Only a little bit in the beginning and then a little bit at the end. Force field scene where she throws the arrow, and like the whole bird scene where she gets turned into a bird. There should be a whole mag movement where like who was Katniss's only real friend, and I'm like, you know what? She deserves more attention in this series. She really does, because she like comes in every now and then, but she's always there helping. Like she literally gave Katniss's mother vials of pain medicine for Gale so that he wouldn't be in pain. And I'm like, man, you're coming in clutch, girl. Like, where are you? I want more of you. I love her so much. Like, first it was the pin, and then now it's the vials. And then of course Katniss is like, oh my god, what if Gale and her are dating, or if she likes Gale? And I'm like, Katniss, like, are you for real? Like 5 minutes ago you said you didn't even know if you wanted to be with Gale. Like, what is happening? Like, man, you know what? It must be nice to have two guys fight over you when you're completely clueless and not deserving of them. So like, I can't believe that the pin was also, I can't remember if it was her mother's or if it was her aunt's, and the aunt was actually in one of the Hunger Games with Haymitch, and he had helped her, but then she ended up dying. A small little detail to add in there, it didn't have to be added, but to me I was just like, oh my god, like I feel so much for her, and I'm just like, I love her. I'm like, where are you? I want more of you. And I don't think she's mentioned again after that, because I'm pretty sure she probably does die at some point. And I feel so bad because I'm just like, no, I loved you. You were such a great character, even though you weren't mentioned all that much. Completely forgot about like the whole vial thing and how like they just throw up and like, you know, this and this and this. And like mentions of the people being hungry and starving do come up every now and then, which is a great little touch to hear that, because I'm like, oh, well, at least it's not forgetting the whole plot of the story is like, you know, the Hunger Games, everybody starves and this and this and this, and then you have the capital people here, like they're just eating a bunch of food and then just throwing it all up. The huge moments with like the whole clock and how they were swimming and trying to keep everybody alive and Finnick was helping everybody, it kind of just didn't really hit home for me, where I just couldn't visually depict it, like I couldn't imagine it. I think it was Madge, or I can't remember what her name. She was the older tribute that was with Finnick, and how she pretty much just sacrificed herself. I was just like, man, that's really messed up. I'm like, Katniss, you could have helped her. It's like, man, like Finnick is doing all the work and he's helping Katniss, and Katniss is just like, no, I'm gonna kill him. I'm gonna kill him when he's not looking. I'm gonna backstab him. I'm like, Katniss, like he's there to help. Like, he wants to help you. And then the whole Mockingjay scene, that was very interesting. I was just like, oh yeah, like I forgot Finnick was hearing voices too, and I'm like, yeah, that's not okay either. And also me and my friend were talking about it. We were just like, how come Finnick just so happens to get weapons with tridents? Like, how does he like one shot everybody with a trident? And I'm just like, I don't know, dude. Maybe it's just because like he's a part of District 4. And then later on when it talks about like, oh, the bread was like a part of the plan and this and this and this and this, and I'm like, okay. But at the same time, I'm just like, why bread? Why bread of all things? Cinna, rest in peace. Finnick and Haymitch. I do kind of like Gale a little bit more in this story. I loved his last line where like, there is no District 12 anymore. I'm like, damn. I was just like, it still holds true. Me and my friend kind of were talking about how he kind of almost has this, not sadistic kind of personality, but kind of like almost this like murderous killer personality, because Katniss talks about how he can set these traps up so meticulously and it's like he's in his own like zone, and it kind of is really weird that like she talks about like his hands could like murder anything. Like, it just feels weird hearing that. It's kind of like, okay, do you like Gale or are you scared of Gale? Like, so, but he feels more like a character, like he feels more kind of like secure. Whereas in the first book, it's just like, oh, he's just mentioned, he's not really talked about. Whereas in here, he feels more like he's grown up, he's an adult, which he is, and he's more, you know, like he wants to start a rebellion and start helping people, you know, he wants to be that figure and be a soldier. And then Peeta's just Peeta, he's always nice. I do kind of feel like Peeta's a little bit more of a pushover in the games this time. Like he's kind of just like, I love you, Katniss, and like, okay, we'll do what you want to do. And I'm just like, I kind of miss like that, you know, kind of like self-deprecating character that we had in the first book. I do kind of miss that a little bit. We do get a little bit of that in the beginning of the series where he's kind of just like, you know, okay, it's whatever, like, and then but he kind of is more like kind of playing with Katniss, where he's kind of like, yeah, we'll run away, but like, I don't think you're gonna do it. But it's kind of more like, yeah, we'll do whatever you want. Like he's kind of almost becoming a pushover, which I really don't totally like about his character towards the end of it. She kind of, and like literally in the end, she talks about like, oh, I just gave up. I'm just like, oh, I want them to fill me up with more medication and all of that stuff so that I don't have to feel anything. And I'm just like, Katniss, you're kind of turning into your mom right now. Like you're shutting down, you're not really like there for everybody. And I understand like she's a part, she's like the figure of the rebellion, but like she kind of makes it seem like, oh my god, I'm the only person that's going through this. Like she threw back at Finnick like, oh my god, like what if they're all dead and this and this and this. Like, Katniss, you have other people that are helping you and you're shutting down and you're pretty much just saying like, I'm the only one that's like going through all this shit and none of you guys are going through it and I'm just gonna shut down kind of mentality. And I'm just like, Katniss, like don't turn into your mom, don't shut down. I'm like, be there for Prim. Prim is there. Like just be thankful that they're there and you're gonna get Peeta out at some point. And I'm just like, you know, like you do not deserve any of these good people in your life. So yeah, I mean, it was an emotional roller coaster, like with the few scenes that like when certain people died. Like it is like a middle part book. It's the book that gets you to the story that gets you to the third story. So it's kind of just like, it's here. It's just meant to get you to the next part of the major stuff. So that's my overall thoughts on this book. But I did really enjoy reading this book. And if I were to give it a rating, I would probably give it a 3.5 star. Anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. And I hope you really enjoyed it. And I will see all you guys in the next video.